Hey, what's happening, everyone? Sam Brief here with a fresh episode of the Mental Game Podcast. And there is so much happening in college sports. Oregon and Washington are joining the Big Ten. The Pac-12 is dissolving. All these big picture questions and stories. TV networks playing a big role. Of course, Division I football is the catalyst for all this. There's a lot of money at stake. So I thought now was as good of a time as ever to dig a little deeper in college sports into pretty much what's the other 99%. Division II and III, the sports that aren't big-time FBS football. So I'm bringing on someone with a really unique perspective. Her name is Mads McKenna. Right now is the Mental Health Advocacy Graduate Assistant at UW-Parkside, which is a Division II school up in Kenosha, Wisconsin. She's a former student athlete. She played volleyball at California University, not in California, in Pennsylvania. That's a Division II school as well. And her perspective is broadened by the fact that she served on the NCAA Board of Governors. So she's been in really high-level meetings with former NCAA President Mark Emmert, and she used to be a voting member. So she works on the granular level with student athletes. Anyone at Parkside who has a concern, needs to take a mental health day, week, talk things out with a coach. The person who's sort of guiding that along and listening to them and offering feedback is Mads McKenna. So this conversation's really enlightening. We focus on the small picture first, how her role works, how she deals with coaches, student athletes, and prioritizes mental health at a smaller, lower budget athletic department. And then we get big picture. Everyone talks about big-time football and the Big Ten and Fox and ESPN. But how does all this stuff affect students at Division II schools? Mads McKenna and I dive in on that, and I learned a ton from her. Part 2 and 3 and 4 with her will probably come in the next few months. But for now, it's part 1 with the wonderful Mads McKenna, which is starting in 3, 2, 1. And it's a joy to bring aboard Mads McKenna, Mental Health Advocacy Grad Assistant at UW-Parkside, in front of a beautiful brick wall, joining the Mental Game. What is up, Mads?
Just living the dream with this new brick background. We're vibing.
Absolutely vibing. And I'm talking to you. The recording date is August 16th. So this is right when NCAA sports are starting up. Fall sports season, soccer, volleyball. It's starting right now. So busy time for you.
Yeah, the student athletes are back on campus. They've been back for a few days now. So there's definitely the buzz back on campus, which is exciting. Our athletics building, it's pretty electric here. So it's good to have them back for sure. It's been a lot more exciting with them back in the building.
It's electric. Let's do the slide. So, Mads, I'm so excited to talk to you, to learn from you, because at such a young age, you have such a rich background in this realm. You were a volleyball student athlete, California University out in Pennsylvania. You are a grad assistant at UW-Parkside, mentoring and coaching people. And you've also served as a voting member on the NCAA Board of Governors. There's a lot of experience in that head. So let's start with where you're at right now. UW-Parkside, Mental Health Advocacy Grad Assistant. Tell me what that means in terms of what you do.
Yeah. So it's the mental health advocacy grad assistant position is new as of 375 days ago. Basically, it's just about over a year old. It's a really unique position that they created here in the athletics department in collaboration with our clinical mental health counseling program, which is a master's program. And essentially last year I was interviewing for a different grad assistant position, and I'd already done a year of my master's in counseling and was like, I'd really love to keep doing that degree. And so they were like, I think we can figure something out that meets some mutual needs within our department and also within the counseling program. So basically, I'm a little hybrid. A lot of what I do day to day is just really building out our mental health programming for our student athletes, whether that's student athlete development sessions that are geared towards mental health, more one-on-one conversations with student athletes, kind of just casual and passing. Something that's really exciting that we just started this summer are mental health wellness sessions, which is a series of 4 sessions that student athletes can sign up for, which are really wellness focused and kind of help them build out the side of their well-being that's, not on the court, not on the field. What else do I do? Those are the big things I would say.
That's a lot.
It is. We also do huddles, which are kind of like support group meetings. And so the one that we've been doing this summer is a staff and coaches huddle that I'll run with staff and coaches, as the name kind of details. And it's just really a space where coaches and staff can come in, talk about, what they're struggling with, what they're doing well, and just kind of lean on each other in that space. Yeah, those are the big things. I'm also getting my master's in counseling, so I have to do some internship hours for my degree that take me off campus a couple days a week. But other than that, really exciting.
That's a lot. And the programming is just so robust. I mean, this is something that truly wasn't around few decades, few years ago, and even at some athletic departments isn't around at all.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, from your vantage point, having been at it for 375 days now, what's the biggest difference between a student athlete at a school like Parkside, who has someone like you, who has all that programming and the resources, and a student athlete at program X that has nothing, and I don't know what to do if I'm having a mental health issue?
Yeah, it's really interesting that you say that, because I think the position that we have here at Parkside is such a unique, kind of innovative way to bring support, because we're not, as far as our budget, our resources go, we're not an A5 big millions of dollar budget school that can afford to hire their own psychologist. But we're also really lucky that this position kind of bridges those needs in a more budget friendly way. So I think just having someone here in my position, but whether it was me or somebody else, I think has been really helpful to demonstrate to the student athletes, like when we say we care about mental health here at Parkside, like we do, and here's how we're showing that, here's how we're supporting it. Even if I'm not the one directly, providing counseling to the student athletes, I'm able to link them to someone who can. I'm able to link them across campus to the resources. I think in so many programs, whether they have, like 3 sports psychologists on staff, or whether it's program X with, no one in kind of this designated role, athletics can get very siloed from the rest of campus, which can lead student athletes to not exactly be fully aware of the resources available to them. So for program X, they probably still have a lovely counseling department on campus, counseling center on campus, but if our student athletes don't have anyone that can like bring that to their attention and connect them to those resources, then exactly like you said, like they're really in the dark and not going to know what to do. So at the very least, I hope that's what I'm able to provide to our student athletes beyond anything like direct programming. But yeah, I really just think it's like, I am very impressed. We have such like an innovative staff here, and the fact that they were like able to come up with this in really the short period that they did has been exciting.
Yeah, and just over a year into it, I'm sure you've learned a lot too.
Yes.
Being on the other side of it. So what's a key learning that you've gotten from the student athletes? Because I mean, sitting here as someone who has worked in athletic departments, who has covered student athletes from the media side, I am blown the hell away by student athletes always. So I'm curious what you've learned in your role.
It's so interesting. So I lost my senior season to COVID. So I think like the last time I actually played collegiately was 2019, my junior year. And so obviously since 2019, a lot has changed. So all of our student athletes, like they played through COVID, whether they were freshmen at the time or whether they were in high school. So there's just the perspectives of like being an actual student athlete during all of the turmoil that brought. Like I did not have to go through all of the testing and practice procedures that came with being an actual student athlete at that time. I was retired and washed up by then. And so just like their perspectives from that, I've learned so much about. Of course, I experienced COVID just like the rest of us, but like their experience of actually playing through that is unique to mine. Like I don't want to sound old when I say this, but like all of like the social media differences, and I'm only 24. I'm about to turn 25, so I'm not like blind to all of the social media things, but that's a unique perspective, like a unique experience that I wasn't exactly living through. I learn a lot about them through that. I learn a lot about social media through that, and then also all the NIL stuff. So I mean, the University of Wisconsin Parkside, maybe not the $1 million deals that we hear about in the news with NIL and student athletes, but our student athletes are still profiting off of their name, image, and likeness. And that was not an opportunity that I had at the time that I was a student athlete. So yeah, just all of the unique things that come with this evolving landscape of college athletics that even in the past 3.5 years have just not completely changed. I think the essence of it is still the same, but just added, I think, unique flares to what they're going through. It's a lot different than what I had to play through.
Yeah, I mean, this evolves so rapidly. I mean, hey, I'm not much older than you. I'm 26. I sometimes say things like you did where I'm like, God, I'm not trying to sound like an old man, but I mean, when I grew up, we didn't have social media. This is all pretty new. I can't imagine what it's like for a student athlete to go out and perform and then get on Twitter or X, whatever it is, later that night and see people talking about them or obsessing over their highlights, how they look in a graphic, whatever it is. Do you find that social media is a constant concern in the mental health realm for student athletes?
I think so. This is my personal feelings towards social media. And when I listen to other speakers that talk about the effect of social media on mental health, especially with our generation, like I feel like people love to say like your generation is obsessed with social media and da 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 da. I'm like, we didn't make it. So that's my first caveat.
Yeah, the older people made it.
Yeah, exactly. I had nothing to do with this. Like, I'm just a product of like the generation I've been raised in, and same with our student athletes today. So I think to say that social media doesn't have an effect on mental health, whether you're a student athlete or not, would not be correct. So I for sure feel like social media adds a new dimension where at any time you can access more than we could ever probably hope to know, could have hoped to know in the past, or like what people think about us, what we look like. Like, think of how much time our student athletes probably spend looking at themselves on Snapchat, or like you said, watching their highlights back, or worrying about, if you are a student athlete, that your games are very publicized and like how your stats come out, seeing what people say about that. I think, of course, social media can have an effect on our student athletes. And then I also struggle because I don't know how many of our student athletes are willing to just unplug from it. Like, I think it's when it comes to recommending and, making suggestions to that population of student athletes, like, for me to look at one of them and say, just delete TikTok, just delete Twitter or X or whatever it is, like, I don't know how realistic that is. So it is kind of like a bind.
And also, if I'm a student athlete and you say that to me, my response might be, well, I'm trying to make money on NIL.
Yeah.
And in order to make money on NIL, I need to be on X. I need to be on TikTok. I need to make content and be an influencer while I'm a student athlete. That is really stressful.
Yeah. And I feel like the second that someone my age or older, anytime someone looks at a student athlete or even just a young person and says like, well, it's the problem with social media, if you should, like, I just think, even myself, I'm not a student athlete anymore. Like, I just tune out from there, because it's like, how realistic is what the rest of what you have to say going to be, and how much can I actually practice that? And of course, like, we could all delete social media, but like you said, like, there's so many opportunities to be had. And yeah, it is an interesting situation.
And student athletes have to be really resilient, right? I mean, you're dealing with so much, possibly scholarship money. You're dealing with your academics, and you have student athletes who are pursuing really hard majors, like pre-med and, pre-law. And I mean, everything is hard to a level, but I'm always impressed by that combination. You're dealing with finances, you're dealing with academics, you're dealing with your practice schedule, your travel schedule, which for some is grueling, and then also your performance and your training and possibly injury rehab. I mean, it blends together in this firestorm. From your perspective, what can the rest of us, and when I say us, I mean people who are not current student athletes, what can we learn from a student athlete who goes through that ringer?
Yeah, I think student athletes are so great at, whether they feel like it or not, are actually so great at time management. Just the simple fact of everything you just listed that student athletes have to balance and manage, it is a lot. And so even if it doesn't feel like it, like, they are managing so much, they're able to, keep track of these schedules, show up to what they need to show up to. I think something else that we could learn, and something else that I think our student athletes could maybe lean into a little bit more, is just whatever your 100% is for that day. If you can just bring 100% of whatever you have to whatever you're showing up to, whether it's practice or class, even if for that day it's 42%. If you can bring 100% of your 42% of that day, then like you're still showing up, you're still doing everything you can, not at the risk of burning out and not at the risk of, you know, driving our mental health lower than it already might be, but just bringing what you can to the table and not feeling like the pressure to be fully 100% all the time. I don't know if that makes sense, but I just think we get so caught up in like this rat race of, you know, like bring our 100%, bring our 100%. And like, yes, please do that. But like, what is actually your 100% today? And what can we do to get you closer to like a full 100%? How are you taking care of yourself between then? Are we resting? Are we doing all these things? So I think if whether you're a student athlete or not, like I think that's probably the most transferable I can think of.
Bring 100% every day. You get burned the heck out.
Yeah.
I've experienced burnout. A lot of my friends and family have, and I'm sure every student athlete at some point will experience burnout. I mean, it really is an epidemic because we push ourselves so much and we drive ourselves to the limit, and then bam, the burnout comes. In your role as a grad assistant focusing on mental health, what do you say when a student athlete comes to you and says, I feel awful, I'm burned out, I'm falling out of love with the sport, what the heck do I do?
Yeah. An analogy that I really, really love that I learned from my therapist in college when I was a student athlete, it's called spoon theory. And don't ask me why it's called spoon theory or why it's with spoons, but essentially the idea is that we wake up every morning with a certain number of spoons, which are like emotional currency, and the things that we do throughout our day either give us spoons back or they cost spoons. So like for me at the time, it was, okay, I had class at 9:30, 10:30, 11:30, and then 1. I use however many spoons to get through class. I go to lunch with my friends, socializing takes up a spoon, and then I get to practice and I'm probably out of spoons by that time. What am I doing to add spoons back in? And so when I talk to student athletes who are burnt out, that's probably where we start, is like, what are you doing that's, you know, cooking through that emotional currency for those spoons? And they laugh. They think that's a funny analogy. I don't know why it's spoons, but that's where we start. And then, you know, like I love to ask them, where can we get spoons back? Like, what are small things that, you know, don't take a lot of emotional currency, but get us a nice return on investment? So, you know, like, is watching 2 hours of Netflix, like that doesn't seem like the most productive, but is that going to pour back into your cup, give you spoons back that then like maybe we can show up for class next morning a little bit more, you know, regenerated, refueled, respooned. I don't know.
Respooned.
That was not good, but yeah. So I don't know. I think that's the starting point. And then if we're constantly running on empty and then, you know, burning ourselves into the ground and just, you know, using spoons that we don't have to get through our day, watching 2 hours of Netflix is not going to be the solution that gives you enough spoons to then like, you know, not feel burnt out anymore. So if it's student athlete that, like you said, I don't feel like I love my sport anymore, then those conversations are a little bit more serious where it comes to, okay, like what are some bigger things that we can do? Do we need to take a step away? Like, do we need to talk to our coaches about, you know, just taking today off practice, taking the next couple of days off of practice? What does that look like? Where are some areas where we can, you know, pull back, check back into ourselves and spend less spoons essentially to then better prepare ourselves to, you know, dedicate more energy to it in the future and show up better. And when we're able to check back in, and whether that's, you know, connecting them to the counseling center, whether that's us having more conversations, whether those are making other changes in their lives, like that's usually where the conversation starts, and finding ways we can pour back into ourselves.
I love the spoon theory. I've often visualized it as buckets, like filling a bucket and taking away from a bucket, you know, an intense workout or just a full work day that might be emptying your bucket, and then the watching of Netflix might be pouring back in. You know, like for me, going on a walk for 10 minutes and calling my mom, that fills my bucket.
Yeah.
Right. 100%. That fills it. Even a workout might fill my bucket. But if you just run on empty, as you know, as your student athletes know, you get burned out. I actually experienced it, Mads, for the first time really broadcasting last year. I mean, play-by-play broadcasting is what I love to do, much like your student athletes love their sports. It was the middle of the baseball season, in the middle of July, and I'm usually waking up jazzed to go and do my thing. And I woke up and I was like, oh my God, I feel like I can barely move. I
Yeah.
can't do this. I don't want to do this. And I called in sick because I felt sick, and I took a day off. And then when I went back the next day, I was just spewing out spoons. I felt great. And I was
Yeah.
ready to do my thing. And it's because I took a day. I don't even know what I did that day.
Mhm.
But I know it gave me spoons, and it gave me a great return on investment. And I'm sure a lot of your student athletes have experienced things like that. You mentioned possibly taking off a practice.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think I would love to know how you felt when you woke up that morning, but like for student athletes who wake up every day and like they love their sport, when they do feel that burnout and like, oh, I don't want to go today. And we all have days where like we don't want to go to work, we don't want to go to practice, like that's normal. But when it is that burnout of like, I love this and now I don't, like that's a jarring experience, and it is kind
Oh,
of scary. So I think that's, like that's its own experience in of itself. Like not only am I burnt out, but like now I'm overanalyzing like this thing that I love, now I don't, da, da, da. Like so much more goes into it than just simply not wanting to go to work or go to practice that day.
you nailed it. I mean, first I'm thinking, I don't want to go. I really don't.
Mm-hmm.
I would need like $1 million to do this right now.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'm thinking, oh my God, do I not love what I do? Do I need to do something else? Should I be a scientist? Should I be a lawyer? Oh my God, what do I? No, 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 no. And next thing you know,
Yeah.
your mind is going crazy, and you just got to pick up the phone and say, hey, I'm sick. I'm going to stay at home. Next
Yeah.
day, wake up refreshed, full of spoons, full of energy. Great. I love what I do. I was just burned out. No one can love what they do so much that they can go 100% every damn day and
Yeah.
expect the same result.
And that is the other thing that's hard, is that like to take for student athletes, and this is not unique to student athletes. I think like career professionals would experience this too, but like even to step away, then like how are you spending that day stepped away? Are you the whole time feeling guilty that you're not at practice, that like you're not actually taking the day off, or that you don't deserve to take the day off? I think in athletics we get caught up into this culture of like, you're so fortunate, you have a scholarship, you have this, you have that, you have everything, like you get to play at the next level, like you're so lucky, what could be wrong? That then even days where we look at our student athletes and say like, oh, just like step back for a second, like it's usually not that easy, which is such a bummer. And like I love to preach that to my student athletes. I can't look at you honestly and say like it was the easiest thing for me when I needed to take a mental health day to take it in college either. So I think that's like the next step of what we have to do in athletics in like the world of sport is, okay, like if like we need to make sure that mental health days are accessible, and that when our athletes are taking them, our student athletes are taking them, that they're actually getting to rest and getting to step away instead of spending the whole day, like stressed and anxious about what they might be missing or what their teammates think, what their coaches think. Am I going to play tomorrow? Like it's a lot, but I think that's like the next thing that we need to tackle.
Is mental health days.
I think mental health days, yes, but I think making sure student athletes and whoever it is feel like when they take the step away that they can actually focus on themselves for the day, and you know not spend the time worried about everything else, because then it's even worse. Then it's like if I was just at practice I'd be miserable, but at least I'm not miserable and thinking about it. And yeah.
A mental health day has to be done right.
Mm-hmm.
And you need everyone to be accepting of it for it to be done right. I would think that you have experienced coaches who are really welcoming of that, and maybe coaches who aren't.
Mm-hmm.
What's the buy-in like from the administrative end of like, all right, Sam's got to take a day here. He's not going to go practice. What do coaches say?
Yeah, I'm very lucky here at Parkside that our coaches all really buy into the mental health things that we're doing as far as the programming goes. And a lot of them are looking for ways to better support their student athletes. But a lot of the conversations, I shouldn't say but, and a lot of the conversations that we have are like, they're in a tricky spot too, where like we have to be prepared to play this week. Like our team has to be prepared. I want to make sure that I'm supporting my student athletes and I'm not exacerbating what they're going through. So, if I do play them on Friday, are they going to be even more burnt out, whether they take this day off or not? How can I balance the realities of, their coaching demands of winning and being supportive, and also balance like what's best for the student athlete? So I think that's just tricky. And I think coaches everywhere are looking for solutions to that. But again, the coaching staff here is lovely when it comes to those things. There haven't been too many instances that I've been involved in of, you know, facilitating those conversations. But in the situations where we sit down with the coach and we talk about a student athlete's mental health, they're almost always, I will say 99.9% of the time, looking for ways to be supportive, looking for ways to accommodate. I don't know. I hope that's similar everywhere. I can't speak for sure about anywhere else, but here at Parkside, I feel like that's what I'm very fortunate to be a part of.
Yeah, where I've been, it's been accepted. I think where we haven't seen it accepted is with the big stars, right? When Simone Biles took a day, when Naomi Osaka took a day, and suddenly everyone's all up in arms because they have these expectations. In theory, there should be no difference between you going to a coach to facilitate a conversation about my mental health as the athletic trainer going to the coach to facilitate a conversation about my rehab from a broken elbow.
Mm-hmm.
That shouldn't be too different, because I'll often hear a coach say to a doctor or an athletic trainer, oh yeah, whatever it takes. Yep, whatever it takes, rehab, all the time we need, all good. So why is it sometimes not the same with mental health?
Yeah. And that's like the biggest argument of like, we should treat mental health very similarly to how we treat physical health. And I think coaches, bosses, supervisors, whoever it is, like when you can see what's wrong, like when you can see, okay, that ankle is out of its socket, you obviously can't play today, then that's so much easier to like reconcile in your own mind of like, well, I can't ask that person to play through it because I can physically see, like you can't walk, you can't do this, your shoulders, like I can hear it clicking when you swing, like whatever. When it's mental health, even if you're someone who fully buys into, not that there's anything to buy into, like it's literally science, but like if you're someone who, is on board with mental health is real, mental illness is real, these struggles are real, it doesn't automatically change that part of us that wants to have answers, that wants to fix things, that wants, concrete solutions or concrete, justification for what's wrong. Like when you can't see depression or you can't see the burnout like physically in somebody, then like you're scrambling for an explanation. And I think that's the tricky part, is that even coach with the best intentions, it can just be hard to grasp at, what's the timeline? When are you gonna be back? When are you gonna da-da-da? And with mental health, it's just different than like an ankle that automatically takes 6 weeks to rehab. So
you have to understand the issue before you know how to deal with it. This is when I've gone to therapy and discussed certain triggers, it's be aware of your triggers and then address your triggers. It's similar with a coach dealing with mental health. Be aware of the issue, understand what depression means, understand what generalized anxiety disorder is, and then address them. And that's where you come in. This is where I want to wrap up the conversation, is big picture, because there is so much happening in college sports right now. I mean, we just came off this massive restructuring of the conferences, schools from out west going to the Big Ten, the essential dissolution of the Pac-12. We don't know what's happening with the schools like Stanford and Washington State and Oregon State and Cal. There's a lot in this, right? You're working at the Division II level where it doesn't really affect you necessarily whether Oregon is in the Pac-12 or the Big Ten. However, these issues that student athletes are writing about are really poignant to me. I mean, I'm hearing about softball student athletes at Oregon who say, hey, I went to Oregon because my family's out here in the Pacific Northwest, and now I've got to travel to Madison, Wisconsin, and Piscataway, New Jersey. Like, what? It's crazy. And the time that these student athletes will have to take away from class is gargantuan. So I'm curious, having in the past been a voting member of the Board of Governors, you've got a deep understanding of the big picture. What's your reaction been to the last month?
Yeah. So not even connected to my role at the Board of Governors. This is just, my perception of things is just, it is, like you said, like it's hard to see these student athletes that are realizing with this conference realignment or with these changes in NIL or changes in, employment status or whatever the big buzzword is, whatever these changes are, student athletes are, what we do this for, who I work here to serve. So to see their reactions to it, exactly like you said, like, this is why I picked this school for these reasons. It just is hard because, we ask our student athletes to do so much, and now we're asking them to do more. And I think whether it's the budget or whether it's the profits or the revenue or I think what matters most is how the student athletes feel about it. So whether it's true or whether it's not true that, say, revenue is a priority here, or whether, I don't know, the fact that the student athletes feel like their well-being wasn't prioritized, or their academics weren't prioritized, or their perspective wasn't prioritized, I think hopefully just about anybody could recognize that that's an issue. And, the NCAA, the Board of Governors, doesn't really have much say in what the conferences decide to do or what institutions decide to do as far as their conference affiliation goes. And with the new constitution that we adopted in the past couple of years, we really gave a lot of power back to the institutions and the divisions to govern themselves how they see fit. The NCAA is a membership organization that people buy into under their own free will and join under their own free will. So we can't necessarily do much about the conference realignments, but yeah, I just think a lot of people are seeing exactly what you said, that it's tough. It's unfortunate for the student athletes that play more than once a week. And even the ones that do play once a week that have to travel across the country however many times, like, that's tough. Like, think about being on a 5-hour flight. Like, it just is not ideal.
All the time. I mean, of course, the decisions are being made for Division I FBS football, right? It's the TV networks and football and all the millions and billions of dollars that are poured into that have a trickle-down effect that are affecting student athletes of all different sports, of all different backgrounds. I mean, it wouldn't be the first industry where the big money and, the top 1% are affecting everyone else. Obviously, that's something that spills into a lot of industries, but I would think that it would be affecting at some point someone like you who's working at more of the micro level of the industry than the macro.
Yeah. And that's something that we talk about a lot, within Division II and Division III has similar conversations, that what the media portrays of college athletics is not the reality for 90% of institutions. Even Division I institutions, the vast majority of them do not have the budget that Ohio State, Oregon, whoever, like whatever XA5 school is. Like, a lot of D1s don't have that budget either. So when the media only talks about, these conferences, these NIL deals with these athletes that play these sports, we miss the really the vast majority of student athletes that, like, that's not what their experience looks like. And then the broader population, or their understanding of the issues going on within college athletics is, again, just kind of tainted by that top 1%, which then just kind of makes it harder for us, other student athletes, smaller schools, to really portray their story and be able to broadcast to the rest of the public, like, well, here's what we're struggling with, and like, here's what we want to see happen. And yeah, it's those are the things that trickle down, is this like, whether it's NIL legislation or whether it's student athlete employment status, the people thinking about those solutions or those ideas are thinking about the student athletes that play these sports at these high levels, and not thinking about how that's going to impact a school like Wisconsin-Parkside and all of our amazing elite athletes, student athletes here. So it's just tough. I think that's something that we need to address, and that we are addressing, of course, but
that's where media comes in. That's where advocacy comes in. And I'm happy to help share all those stories because, I mean, you cannot ignore the other 99%. And that's not to say the other 99% are lesser. It's just to say, obviously the football and what is going on, Fox Sports at 7:00 on a Saturday night, that's what's paying the bills. But that doesn't mean it needs to be the priority, because there are so many more student athletes at so many other levels playing so many other sports. Mads McKenna, it has been a delight to have you on. I've learned so much from you in just about a half hour here. Frankly, would love to already book you for a part 2, because I think there's so much that we can tap in as you get into the next 375 days of your work.
I'd be happy to do that. I love talking about mental health and athletics. I love college athletics. I love Division II. I love all the experience I've been able to have, at the national level within our governance structure so far. And so I could talk for ages about it. So if you want to book that second one, just let me know.
Let's do it. I mean, hey, we can pretty much talk for 10 hours about it, and I can make 10 episodes. So I am sure you'll be on as a return guest. Mads McKenna, wishing you and the Parkside Rangers all the best as you kick off this 23-24 school year. Thanks for joining the Mental Game, Mads.
Thank you.
So thankful to Mads McKenna for joining on the Mental Game podcast. Just an enlightening conversation. I learned a ton about the way college sports work just in that 40 minutes or so with Mads, and cannot wait to record more with her. It really is amazing how, of course, big money guides these decisions. As we discussed, college sports is far from the only institution or business where the big money and the top 1% make decisions for everyone else. But man, if I'm a softball student athlete at Oregon who went to school there because all my family's in the Pacific Northwest, and suddenly I'm spending half my time in places like Iowa, Illinois, Wisconsin, New Jersey, Maryland, I'm looking around saying, what is happening to me? So Mads McKenna with a lot of great perspective on that. Cannot wait to have her back. And folks, I really appreciate you, as always, for joining the Mental Game podcast. Quick reminder, I'm actually running in the Lifetime Chicago Half Marathon at the end of September. It's September 24th, and I'm raising funds for the Lasers Ladybug Society, which spreads mental health awareness, education, programming all across the country. So I have the link to the GoFundMe in the description of this episode. I want to raise $2,000 as of the time of recording, which is the 25th of August, a little bit short. So help me out, help a great cause, and I'll run like hell for you. This has been the Mental Game podcast. As always, appreciate the time. Hope you have a wonderful day, everyone. Take care of yourself and others. And I'm Sam Brief saying so long from Chicago.